Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a nice hump day. Little different for us, right? We've tended to do these on Thursdays, so thank you for coming on Wednesday. I want to just start off thanking Sarah for joining us today. Sarah is a school psychologist. Really perfect timing as we're entering this new school year. College students have already started, and we're looking toward, and some high school and middle schools have already started, elementary schools. And then Samantha Curiale-Feinman, the director of New Frontiers Executive Functioning Coaching. So really bringing that learning angle and some more of these soft skills. So just briefly, I'm going to launch a quick poll just so we understand a little bit of the makeup of the audience. So if you could just quickly clear that, and then we'll be able to jump right into things. So as we see it coming in, so we got some professionals and then parent. Okay, so more professionals, but then we also have a parent, which is great. So I wanted to just jump kind of right in as like setting the table for what do kids need most as we're transitioning into this unknown. For those that have attended some of our other webinars, we've really tackled a lot of this from a learning standpoint, things like previewing and that type of stuff. But I'd love to hear about that school psychologist angle of how are you preparing, Sarah, for those that you're working with to get them ready for what they're going into. And so I'd love to just start with exploring that a bit of what maybe are you doing and what might be some things other professionals or parents can do to help set up for the best chance of success going into this school.
From my perspective as a school psychologist, I really think that focusing on social and emotional well-being and health is really important. What we know about the brain and learning is that you can't learn if you don't feel safe. And we don't feel safe if we don't have a predictable or consistent environment. And that safety piece is really difficult right now. Trying to make kids and students feel safe in an environment where they have to wear masks, where everyone's afraid of getting sick, or that predictability piece at home, where at home they might feel safe and physically safe, hopefully. But then how do we get that predictability and that consistency in a home environment? So as we think about the fall and think about transitioning, it will vary depending on what the school situation looks like, but thinking about consistency, predictability, and safety, and how we can, in the midst of not really having access to any of those things, what are some ways, what are some strategies that we can sort of employ to provide that for students? Because you really can't learn if you don't feel safe.
And I love that as like an overview and a little more granular in that. What I've heard from a lot of parents is this: should we be adjusting our old expectations? And so what should the expectations that we place on our kids be in this new environment? And so when parents are asking about things like, they were straight A students, like, is that still as important? What are those focuses on learning? I'd love to hear you to explore a little bit more about that importance of like health, safety to encourage any learning to occur. But I'd also love just to hear you comment a little bit more on, there's been so much about like emotional intelligence, resilience, types of things, and I like being positive. So what opportunities does this new unique situation provide to kind of shift some of our learning goals a bit in more of those other soft skills and mental health skills and strategies?
I think it's kind of difficult in some ways, because you have a lot of those soft skills you learn through engagement with other kids. You learn that in social environments, and right now we're not necessarily in that place where we have access to them in the same way that we used to. And also I remember talking to another parent, and I thought she put my concerns sort of beautifully. I'm a parent also, and she was very nervous about going back to school, having her kids go back to school, because she said, I don't want my kids to be in an environment where it's not okay to help. That was like, and I thought she just put that beautifully, that idea that like we are sending our kids out there to learn these soft skills, to learn these social emotional um, um, skills and have that piece of their development. And yet we're sending them out in an environment where if they were to, their natural inclination to help someone may be an obstacle, and they may be stopped by a teacher or a parent, or like, don't touch them, or don't help, don't reach for their, pick their pencil up from the ground, those sorts of things. And I think it's really hard, but extremely important to think about, well, how can I shift my focus from what does helping look like right now? How can I develop those soft skills? How can I, what can I do today to be helpful? Whether it's in my house, whether it's for me, whether it's for the person that lives next door, or what, just coming up with and thinking about that, making that a priority. How can I be helpful today? I think some of the other things we can do in terms of looking at resilience is taking this time when students have more opportunities to be alone, to use that time to build skills that are resiliency-based skills, mindfulness, checking in, increasing your self-awareness about what you're feeling, what's coming up for you right now, and then what you can do to address that. Do I need to talk to a parent? Do I need to, I haven't really talked to anyone in about a week. I need to schedule a Zoom play date or whatever, or I need to go outside and run. I need to, whatever it is that I need to do. And I think that some of those mindfulness and strategies can be helpful in terms of building that resilience, checking in with kids, something that's really hard to do when you have a large social network, which we can sort of take advantage of that and shift our focus a little bit, like, how can I build this resilience here? And I think for parents and professionals too, letting kids know they're doing an amazing job already, like pointing out their already resilience, all the things that they're doing, all the ways that they are being flexible, that they are surviving in an environment that's difficult, that they've already built that sense of self-efficacy, and for students.
Awesome. Quick side note, I did forget to mention, please submit any questions in the dialogue box. I threw it into the chat as well. So please submit questions. And then at the end, I'll give you guys access to turn on your microphones to be able to ask a Q&A section as well, if you'd like. So Sam, I get giddy personally, and I'm sure you do, about executive functions, and it is painful to see that there is so much now more focus, but this is something you and I have lived and breathed. You go off to college, you need those executive functions to succeed. And now that onus is being put on a younger age. But I want to continue off similarly that line of questioning with Sarah. What are some of the benefits of what these opportunities are providing us? And just to set the stage even more, plans are only as useful as we can adapt those plans. And oftentimes, secondary school is no adaptation of a plan. You go to class, you do this, you're told where to be, you take college entrance exams in junior year, and then you go off and you apply to college, and it's this set plan, like their future is written for them. What are some of these benefits where instead of waiting for college and you fall off the cliff and you're now on your own, how can both professionals and parents use this opportunity to the best benefit for some of these executive functioning skills, these soft skills more in that cognitive realm as opposed to that emotional, mental health realm?
Well, I think that I think we can all agree that whatever school looks like for kids this year going into it this fall, it's going to look in some capacity different than it has before for them. And, and that wasn't necessarily a transition that they were ready for, right? So sometimes we have planned transitions. Planned transitions are things like, we know a child is going from elementary school to middle school. There's a big difference between those two things. There's a transition from middle school to high school to college. And those are predictable transitions. I don't think that any of us predicted how we would be starting the fall semester with our kids. So there are also these unpredictable transitions. And so I think with unpredictable transitions, sometimes we have to really focus on what can we get out of it? And what we can get out of it a lot of times is settling into the disruption that a transition causes, understanding that it's not easy to go from something that is comfortable to something that is new and uncomfortable, but that once you do settle in and start a new routine and get used to your new structure, that it becomes easier as time goes on. So, I think from an executive functioning point of view, just that whole larger concept of working on transitioning successfully, learning how to shift from what used to be to what the new normal is, learning how to be flexible, and even things like, adapting to what this newness is. And I love how Sarah was talking about kind of that concept of help, and how her colleague doesn't want, their children to go into an environment where they feel like they can't help. But, helping there's a new definition of helping now in school, right? Helping in school now is not sitting next to your friend and working on a project together necessarily, but maybe help now is shifting to keeping people safe by being socially distant, right? So we're helping to kind of show our children that we have to be flexible with what our thought process is. We have to be flexible with what we think our routines are. Things happen in life, and some fortunately and unfortunately, change occurs sometimes, and we have to look at what that change is, prepare for how things are going to look different, and then embrace those differences and practice new systems and routines in order to help ourselves be successful. And Sarah, again, right, that goes back to that resilience piece, right? And so, so identifying that feeling of not feeling safe, but what can we do to feel safe? What can we do to feel successful into this transition of this new environment?
And there's just two things from talking with parents and professionals that I wanted to highlight there. A lot of people are saying, well, this is such a unique situation. This would never come up. It's so difficult for our kids to be doing this through school. I want everyone to take a step back. Every single one of us through this transitioned to a virtual model in one way or another as adults. And so this is a good framework of, maybe it's not going to be a pandemic later in their life, but there might be the need for adaptability. Companies might say, we're getting rid of our office, we're going virtual. And so learning through adversity and change, that is a lifelong skill. When you get specific and say learning through adversity and change in a pandemic, maybe not, but that ability of that flexibility is important. And we even see it, we've seen it in our own company, and we've seen it with other professionals where other people have struggled with those transitions. But that struggle is okay. And this ties to that second point I just wanted to make. For new college students, I always say, don't expect to ace your first exam, because you have no idea what your first exam is going to be like. And that's for every single semester. You don't know how your professor is going to test you. What are they going to test on? What's important is you identify that struggle and you adapt your strategies. And so I think setting that expectation of, we're trying something new, we'll see how it goes, and we'll adapt. And guiding them through that is helping them learn those lifelong skills that will be able to be used in separate contexts. Yep, jump right in, Sarah.
I just want to say about that, like in terms of executive functions and this idea of plans and adaptability, you can kind of trick your brain into making unpredictability predictable, right? Like you can set it up that like I know that this is something we're not going to know, and so every day is like, well, what is it today? And if that sense of unpredictability, you sort of set yourself up for it so that it becomes predictable. Like every day I wake up and I'm not sure what's going to happen. that's and you set that expectation, you can kind of trick your brain to not be in that fight or flight state, to be sort of activated. And I also think that when it comes to plans, and a plan is only as good as it is as you can adapt to it. I think sometimes for students, as you go forward, the thing that's really hard for and it depends on the age level, but is like you're going to college and you're like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here before I have to pack everything up and go home again. Or same thing with younger students in elementary and high school. They go into school, they're like, I don't know how long this is going to last and what's going to happen. And sometimes just working through like, well, what is the plan? So these are some of the potential things that could happen. So then what would you do? What would that look like? And that can just take it right off that executive functioning plate. It then can go to the back burner because you're not worried about it, and it frees up that space for you to be able to do the learning that you need to learn, to do the learning you need to do, just so that it's not taking up that space because you're not worried. When is this going to happen? What am I going to do? It just resolve that. And I've done that with my kids when we were first staying home, just about getting sick. Like, well, what would happen if mommy or daddy got sick? I have young kids, 4 and 7. And so we talked about well, we have an attic space. It's got an extra bed. It's where a guest stay. It's got a separate bathroom. So that's and they stopped asking. They stopped. I watched their anxiety level go down because we had a plan. Well, if Charlie got sick, then this is what would happen. And mommy would go to the attic and no one would talk to mommy. But if you were in the attic, I would be there with you. If you got sick, you wouldn't have to be up there by yourself. And just and then we talked about how I could yell out the window and just having that. Now they're not worried about it because we don't know when it's going to happen, or if it's going to happen, that we would get sick and so sick that we would have to, sort of separate. But now they know it'll be fine. That, there's a plan there, and I think we can set that up for students as they transition. Let's think about the possible outcomes and make sure we're prepared for that.
And I think sometimes we think of plans as straight lines, like it's just A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. But that assumes, exactly like you said, Sarah, predictability. Life isn't predictable. And so I know there's not really as many magazines, but I remember when I was younger, those tween magazines that would have are you A or B? And then it goes down the different paths and you get to a different outcome. Really, plans are more of tree diagrams, that there's 2 outcomes, or maybe there's 3 outcomes, and then that goes down a different path. That increases flexibility of thinking that way. That helps understand that you can only control so much in your environment. You can't control everything. And I love that framework of, well, if that happens, then this might happen. The one thing I will give as a grain of salt, that can become a little problematic with anxiety, of if you give too many options and then there's so much unknown and what if, and so it's about there's no clear answer. It's about knowing either the person you're working with or your child to figure out that right balance and help them figure out that right balance. I've done percentages with kids sometimes of, well, what's the likelihood of that happening? 1%? Okay, let's not worry about that. And so I want to jump over to Sam on one piece, and then I also want, Sarah, you to tackle this. I'll re-ask the question, but this idea of engagement with learning. And so sometimes this ties in with motivation, with frustration, and I'd love to hear Sarah tackle some more of those pieces. But just Sam, when we see kids getting unengaged with learning, and I don't want anyone to think that this only happens in virtual learning. You just might see it because it's in front of you. This happens also in the classroom. I've been using the example of me walking to the bathroom recently. I just need to step away from the learning. But what can parents do to help with some of that engagement with learning? When sometimes kids get labeled as lazy or they don't care. But what's a good framework for both professionals and parents to view? Even if those things are true, but what should they be thinking about first and trying first before jumping to some of those other conclusions about not being engaged in the learning process?
Yeah, well, I think that, first and foremost, we have to identify why the students look like they're not motivated to do their work, right? And so the why they're not motivated can be several different things. They may not they may not know how to engage in the curriculum. They may not know how to find what they want to do. They may be burned out. So really looking at kind of like what is the root cause of that motivation declining, and then how can we incorporate things in terms of helping them to want to engage in the curriculum. I think especially from a home perspective, something we talk about a lot is that there's been a lot of change to how we identify home lately, right? Home is now work for a lot of us. Home is now school for a lot of us, even if it's just part-time. But that's something that's very different than it ever has been before. For the vast majority of us, we went somewhere else to work, and our children went somewhere else to do school, and we would come home, maybe do a couple emails, do a little work from home. Our kids would come home and do their homework, but there were very clear definitions of what home is, what work is, what school is, and all of those lines have become blurred now, right? So home is school, home is work, and so we need to start to very clearly define when is home, when is home school, and when is home work, and start to structure a visual representation, including when am I doing school, when do I have downtime, when am I taking a break, when are we having family time, when can I engage in something social, even if it's just virtually, when can I, and if all of this school, work, home, everything is happening from the same place, there needs to be very clear boundaries of what is happening when, and a structured visual representation of a schedule can be very helpful with that, because sometimes the kids just don't know what they're supposed to be doing when, especially when everything is happening in the same environment. And on top of that, model your expectations for them, right? So we've been working from home since March, and that's a new thing for me. I had an office and I was working there, and my kids were going to school, and now we're all home and they're doing school and I'm doing work, and I'm modeling for them. The expectation for me is that I have clear boundaries for myself of when I'm supposed to be doing work and what that looks like. I have a desk, I get dressed in the morning, I have breakfast, I do some exercise, I take care of myself, and I work at my desk from this time to this time. I'm going to take a break. We'll hang out. We'll maybe go outside for a few minutes, and then I'll go back to work. And helping your kids to set up a structured schedule like that, especially if they're doing school from home, can be very helpful for motivation. They know where they need to be when and what they should be doing in a predictable environment like that. Also like helping them to create some sort of a motivating, dedicated workspace for them. This really was helpful with my daughter, who's in middle school, and she was laying on the couch with the Chromebook on her lap, really disengaged with what it means to be an effective and an efficient student. So we spent time. How do you want to, how would you be sitting in school if you were in school? At a desk or at a table, in a chair. Okay, how can we emulate that at home? And how can we make it a place where you are proud of that space and where you can utilize that space?
I just want to jump in. I just want to direct it to something, and then Sarah, I promise I'll jump over to you with that. But so I often, when I'm talking with clients, no matter their age, is I use this refrain of the only one that knows what's going on up in here is you. No one else can know. But parents and professionals sometimes approach this idea of, but they're not sharing that. So we might say, why aren't you motivated? Or they're not bringing that to the table. And so, Sam, I'd just like to hear a little bit about what strategies we use to get that out, to get what's really going on. And it's not easy, it sounds easy, but I'd love for you just to explore a little bit of question-based inquiry. And you talked about it a little bit with your daughter in regards to what did your desk look like?
Right.
I just want to do a quick sideline of, Don't set the desk up for them. Involve them in setting up the desk for themselves. But
That's
I'd love
right.
to hear a little bit about the question-based inquiry, and then we'll jump over to Sarah.
Right. And that's what we do with coaching, right, Casey? It's all about not doing for them, but also not expecting for them to do it themselves if they're not doing it, right? So we have a process that goes on in our head. I need to work today, so I need to get dressed, I need to have breakfast, I need to start my computer, I need to make sure my internet is working, I need to know what my tasks are for the day. It's very similar with kids, right? I have to go to school today, whether it be home, in person, whatever it is. What are the steps I need to take to get there? Those are the goals for the day. And so our brains create systems and routines and have us do things in order to direct us towards our goals. If I have to get my schoolwork done today, I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to achieve that goal. And sometimes students have a tough time with bridging the gap between what needs to get done and actually getting it done. And that's where this question-based strategy comes in really handy, because it's not expecting them to do it on their own, because they're not. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an issue. And if we just do it for them, what they're learning is, anytime I need help, somebody's going to do it for me. So we really want to ask them questions and guide them and lead them towards achieving that goal. So instead of, get up, get dressed, here's your breakfast, open your Chromebook, check your emails, okay, good morning. What's today? Monday. Okay, is it a school day? Yes. Okay, what is the first thing you need to do what time do you have to be ready for school? What time do you have to be in front of your computer? 9 o'clock. What time is it now? 8:30. What do you need to get done in between now and then? And so helping them, guiding them towards the thought process of what may happen very naturally for us, and it's automatically happening in our minds, right? I need to do X, Y, and Z, and it just happens. Helping to guide the students into developing that thought process, developing the skills they need to get themselves from point A to point B, rather than just doing it for them. Because again, then they learn, well, if things fall apart, somebody's just going to do it for me, and they don't learn how to solve that problem themselves.
And sometimes it can come across as like talking down to people. So like a line of inquiry might be, are you distracted? What do you do when you're distracted? Why do you think you're distracted? And the answer might simply be, I'm hungry. And then challenge them again. Well, what do you do when you're hungry? And I know it sounds like such a simple question, but you're mapping out their own independent problem solving. You're guiding them through it, and just like Sam said, not doing for them. Oh, you go get a snack when you're hungry? Why aren't you getting a snack yet? Because I don't want to miss what's going on in class. That's great. Good. When do you have your next break? In 5 minutes. You can wait. Do you think you can wait that long? Yes. And so what you're doing is guiding their thought process. And so, Sarah, I want to pull you in here a little bit. Anything you have to say just on that line of topics, please interject and throw in. But I'd also love for you to explore a little bit when it's less about, and when it's more about that feeling and that feeling of safety and stuff that's leading to the lack of motivation. So I know I'm hearing more of, but like school used to be fun, and it's not fun. I've heard this from college students. I got together with 6 kids to watch a basketball game, and public safety came and closed it down. I just don't want to be here. And so it ties in a lot of resilience, but when that engagement of learning I'm not motivated for this, it's different. What can either like helping reframe how the students are approaching things, or what parents and professionals can do to help them with reframing that to address that engagement and motivation? And the reason why I'm using motivation instead of engagement a lot is I believe everyone wants to be engaged, but sometimes they struggle with that motivation to be engaged. So I'd love for you to explore that a little bit.
There's a couple of things that I like sort of come up immediately. and some of that in terms of, I just a thought I was having as you were talking about, like, what's the reason you're hungry? When can you wait? The other thing too is to like, what can we do tomorrow? How about tomorrow you bring a bar, like an energy bar or a snack, and you have it right there so you can eat it. And like, you know, building in the skills of both what to do in the moment, but then also how to plan ahead. And, you know, any sort of executive functioning needs that anyone has means that planning ahead is not the strong suit. And so making sure to like find those pitfalls. And I think it depends on the age level of the student and the children that you're working with. But for, I think in every case, when it comes to that engagement and motivation piece, is that, and I think we underestimate people sometimes, especially the younger the child is, that reasons are really helpful. They're not the strategies, they're not the thinking it through, it's not the planning, but tell them why. Explain to them what's going on. Like, this is why we need to do this. And I was thinking about the idea we were sort of talking about, there's physical hygiene, and then that sort of crept over into sleep hygiene, and now there's screen hygiene, right? And there's learning hygiene too, which is exactly some of the things, Samantha, you were talking about with getting a desk and creating a space. But what does that mean in terms of sort of executive functioning, engagement? What's the reason? Why am I here? And sometimes thinking about it from sort of like a Eastern philosophical perspective, like a mindfulness perspective, we suffer because we don't accept reality. We don't accept what's true. That's where the suffering exists. Like when you get a parking ticket, you stop worrying about the parking ticket once you acknowledge that you got it, and you're like, all right, I guess I have to pay that. Like then you stop getting mad about it. Once you accept that you have a parking ticket you're going to pay, you stop. That suffering ends. And so when it comes to a student who's in college and it's like, I can't watch a game with my friends, well, you're suffering because you're not accepting reality. This is the reality. So how can we make it, how can we shift our focus? I'm at school for a different reason. What's the reason right now? And all of those other benefits that I thought that I had that were part of going to college aren't there. But does that mean I don't want to be here? Does that mean that this isn't what I want to do? So refocusing that a little bit. And when you talk about that learning hygiene and engagement, like, well, what are your reasons? What are you doing here? How are you focused? What's the goals that you have? And then how are you creating the right kind of space? What's your learning hygiene? What's your study hygiene, or whatever it happens to be that is aligned with that goal? If you have social goals, great. Let's talk about those in a different way. If you really want to watch a game with friends, how can we make that happen? But you can't expect that as part of school right now. That's not reality. And so how can we make that happen? That sort of focus is that sort of shift is what I was thinking about.
I just to interject quick before you move on, that's similar what I did with that college student that I was talking to. He was like, I don't get it why one class is in person and one's virtual. And then just the next sentence, he goes, it's so annoying that we have to wear those cloth masks and not the comfortable ones. I go, well, at least you don't have to do it twice a week. Like you're going one day a week. So it's kind of like looking at the positives in the situation. And just on that Eastern philosophy, I'll throw in a Western philosophy. It's Stoicism. So read Marcus Aurelius. If you prepare every day for the worst outcomes, you're always going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yep.
I didn't read them. I listened to a podcast on it. So if anyone wants a quick dip into Stoicism, you can check out Philosophize This. But I just wanted to throw those two in. But please continue, Sarah.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about is for younger students, like even high school students, elementary, middle, and high school students, parent engagement. The research is very clear. The parent engagement and student outcomes are very closely linked. The more parents are engaged in student learning and school for their children, the better the outcomes. And that doesn't mean you're supposed to be a helicopter parent, right? Like that's not really the goal. But the idea is that, and I saw this very clearly in my son's preschool class, the teacher would send pictures. He would like take pictures and just kind of like throw them onto a form. And I would get an email every day with these pictures, and like it was like 3 sentences, and all he did was change the activity, right? The sentence format was the same. But when I would pick up my son, I got one every day at 3, and I would pick him up, and then I would say, how was the whatever you did today? What I noticed was remarkable was there would be times where he would say something that I knew he heard that at school, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't get that piece of paper. And so what he's getting at school, I'm reinforcing at home, and I'm noticing the things that he's bringing home that are from school, and I'm keyed into that, and then I'm sort of refocusing on that. And this opportunity that we have right now, where kids are at home, even if it's a hybrid model, if they're virtual full-time or hybrid, we have a unique opportunity to be very engaged as parents and use this opportunity to help support that idea of engagement. What are they doing during the day? What's going on for them? And how can I incorporate that and in the rest of the afternoon? If you know that they're working on this particular lesson or this particular activity, or photosynthesis is the topic, or history or whatever, like, make a weekend trip. You don't have to do much. You don't have to track down the teacher to find out which president they're learning about or which war they're focused on. Like, just listen in, just log into their account, and you can do a lot to help increase that motivation for school by incorporating the concept in that process. Whether, like what you're watching at night, if you pick a movie to watch together, or, just kind of really making it something that they see the purpose and they see the connection, and there's different, and because the learning online is not going to be as engaging for the most part as the in-person learning. There's not the benefits of, I get to see my friends, I get to brag about my good grades, or whatever it is. And so ways that we can help support that by taking a day trip to like a local war memorial or something, or going to a museum or an online museum tour, or some ways that we can sort of support what's going on and increase their motivation and engagement. And the other, it was something that was said early on about trying to get that out, what you were talking about, Casey, like they're not telling me what's going on, how do I get that out? And there's two interesting things I have sort of heard recently. One is that the main focus, where we build our bonds with people, is not what we do with them that's fun or interesting. It's not those memories. It's what we do with them when they are upset. And so, like, if we can focus on that, I think that is something, the way we support people when they're upset, that we don't minimize it, that we don't say, like, this, you're getting upset over something silly, that's ridiculous. But we lean into it and we support people, our family, our partners, our children, our students, when they're upset, instead of minimizing it or trying to resolve it, or we need to hurry up and get this out of the way because we got to move on to something else. That can help create that bond. There's also a good resource, there's 2 books, How to Talk So Children Will Listen, and How to Listen So Children Will Talk. Those are 2 books that are really, really good. And it's just sort of reframing how we ask our questions and how we maintain curiosity so that we can navigate that.
And so I love that. I refer to that piece, camaraderie through misery. And I heard that, was it a year and a half ago, from Michelle Garcia Winner, where it's actually a cognitive neuroscientific shown experience that negative memories leave a very different impact than positive ones. Positive ones are hazy and not specific. I feel good. I felt good. Whereas negative ones are very poignant and they leave a different type of imprint. And so that just, I love that. It makes so much sense, because you think of your best friends, it wasn't always good times with them. Oftentimes they were there for the hardest times, and that's where those close bonds occur. And also, just to highlight that engaged learning, oftentimes with that engaged learning, the difficulty there is they need some modeling of that. Sometimes teachers are shown as like, oh, they just like to teach, they like that piece. And seeing from parents that engaged learning is so important. I want to first shift over to Sam. So being engaged, listening on learning, if only all of us were fortunate enough to be able to kind of observe our kids learning virtually. And Sam, and I hope you don't mind me going a little personal here, but how do you get creative? I know I keep you working hard throughout the day, so you might not be able to be there to hear it. How are you getting creative? And you're not listening in on some of that. How are you getting creative to be engaged with that learning and then extending it in not a structured learning environment, but a more organic learning environment? What's been your experience, or what are you preparing for as going into this next school year?
Well, so I think, first and foremost, everybody has to kind of do an individual analysis, right, of what they're dealing with. So, taking my own personal experience and my own life as an example, I have one in elementary school and I have one in middle school. My elementary school son needs more help than my daughter does, and we see that, I think, just generally speaking, is that as kids go into middle school and then into high school, they're a lot more independent when it comes to their academics. And so, we also want to think about kind of like the function of school and how school, what the purpose in school. And elementary school, you're learning how to learn. You're learning how to engage with the curriculum. And in middle school and high school, you're primarily learning curriculum, right? You've set the stage for learning. I know I've learned how to follow directions, how to pay attention, how to shift from one thing to another, and now you're given a lot of curriculum to review. And so, in my specific situation, as I assess my own situation, I say to myself, well, my son, who's in elementary school, is going to need a little bit more of my support or somebody's support, because he's still learning how to learn. So his time on task looks very different than my daughter's time on task. My daughter will be accessing, but she may need a lot of support when it comes to keeping track of all of the different subjects that she is responsible for engaging in. So everybody, first and foremost, you need to do an individualized analysis of who your children are as learners and what they're going to need. And then you make and then you look at, are we going into a hybrid model? Are we going into an in-person model? Are we going into an online model? And what do I need to do to prepare my children for those different models? With my kids are going into a full in-person model. But again, that in-person is looking very different than what in-person has been before. So I'm spending a lot of time previewing with my kids how school is going to look different. You're going to walk into it, when you walk into the classroom, you're not sitting at tables with your peers anymore. The desks are 6 feet apart. There's a plastic partition, and you're going to be wearing masks. And so helping to preview how that's going to look different and practice and preparing how that feels different is important. Discussing the need to be flexible, discussing the need to be okay with unpredictability. You may go back to school, they may have to shut schools down. You may have to go back to virtual, you may have to go to hybrid. Just getting them ready for, again, who they are as a middle school and elementary school learner and what their model of learning is. If you're a parent helping to prepare your kids going into more of a hybrid model, they have to understand what that means and what days they're going to school, and navigating that schedule might look a little different, because there'll be days that they have to get up and get out of the house, and then there's going to be days where they have to get up and get in front of the computer. So helping them to structure and be organized with a frequently changing schedule can be very helpful in terms of preparing. And for that the last piece for that virtual model, again, what is the access to teachers going to look like? What are your responsibilities of when you have to be on the computer? You know, when are you going to participate and engage in live instruction versus be given assignments that have to be done either independently or with somebody at home that can help to facilitate that for you. So just, you know, everybody has to look at their own family, their family's needs, and how things are going to be different in the fall, and really prepare the kids for that and practice those things if they can.
And I think that's so important. Just to tie together a couple of the things. The questioning, ask the question of who did you go to for help when you were stuck in school? Who should you go to for help when you're stuck if you're in a virtual model? How do you go to them for help? So that if they approach you for help, you can see if they access their other resources, but you have to make sure that they know how to do that. I know a lot of schools are using Slack. Do they know how to use Slack? I can tell you I don't. I have no idea. I've never used it. So just those basics of maybe them coming to you for help is actually a sign of difficulty elsewhere. And let's remove those assumptions of it's just easier for them to come to me. Actually, that's what they learned. I go to the adult in the room. Where's the adult in the room? And it just happens to be you now. The one other thing I wanted, and this is just because I'm really passionate about what Sarah said about engaging in the learning. Have your kids teach you things. Mm-hmm. Build up their confidence that, especially when they get older, I know teenage angst, sometimes they'll push back, boost their confidence that they probably know more math than you know because you haven't used it in years. Boost their confidence that they have something to teach you, and have them teach you these things. The other thing is Wikipedia gets such a bad rap. YouTube gets such a bad rap. And that's our own baggage of not being able to separate out good Wikipedia usage and good YouTube usage. I watch this guy Caspian report that is geopolitics around the world, and I love it. And it's a really good learning experience. So when doing some of this engagement, you were like that Abraham Lincoln, he's pretty cool. Let's watch that movie together. Let's go find a YouTube video. Go down a Wikipedia hole, but don't do it during the school day. Yeah, you can specifically say when is a bad time to do it. But if your biggest problem was your kid goes into Wikipedia between the hours of 7 and 8 p.m. and he's teaching himself stuff, that's not really a big problem. That's a good thing. It's curiosity, it's engagement with learning, and you want to encourage that. You might redirect it to more productive learning, but that's where I see a big difference between things like Wikipedia and YouTube than social media, because social media has more limited learning. There is learning, but more limited. And so Sarah, any comments on that? But I do want to give also just this idea of what supports parents can ask from schools. Yeah. So like the preschool shared things with you to help with that engagement. And if you can, separate out what is a formal ask of the school, whether it be from like an IEP versus a collaborative ask from the school, because I think sometimes those bleed over, and it's important to approach these relationships collaboratively. So just comment on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things, like in terms of strategies for engagement, and you know, I think that some of the things that we want to do too is when we talk about our schedule, what we have to do today, what's going on, we want to try to remember the positive. Like, why are you excited to go to school today? What are you excited? What are you going to learn today? Like, what's on your agenda? And sometimes just adding the expectation that it's going to be engaging, like, makes it engaging. One of the things that it like in remembering somebody's name, that's like a little trick, that is when you're introduced to someone, as they're saying my name is, you say in your mind, what's that person's name again? And it locks that information in a different part of the brain. And so sometimes when we ask those questions of students, like, oh, what are you excited to learn about today? Right? That's a different question than, could you get excited about something? that, or once you get all this done, right? If you just stop messing around, once you get it all done, then we can go on and do something fun. Like, we're setting up those expectations. We're not setting the brain up to incorporate that information in a positive way. And so those are some things that we can do. And I also think that Samantha was talking about a visual schedule. And I think for everybody at all age levels, having a calendar where you mark down which are school days, which are not school days, like a visual calendar. For younger kids, you can put pictures and add things on there that you're going to do. When you're going to go on vacation, or when you're going to see the grandparents, or when you're going to go on this trip. And every day look at it and say, what's today? Is today a school day or not school day, or a home day or in-person day? And have it out and have it always available so they can always look, and it helps create that predictability. And it also creates things they can look forward to. Things that I think that's a hard thing. I think it's why kids are leaning towards screens so much, because it's sort of mind numbing and, sort of blocks out, oh, there's nothing, I'm not looking forward to anything. Like, I don't know what's next. And so try to build those things in, even if it's just 2 weeks from now, we're going to see our cousins, right? Like, it doesn't matter, but every day you block it off, you get a little closer. It can really help create that structure and helps kids feel like there's something that they're looking forward to, something that's happening in the future to keep them like present and engaged.
A quick interjection there. I don't want to get too nerdy and scientific here, but we refer to time, really in the scientific world, it's not its own thing. It's space-time. It's in relation to other things. And so when it's all stuck in here time, it feels like something totally out of our control and not accessible. Right. And the visual component shows where we do have control, because you don't actually have control of time. You have control of things within time. And so that physical representation does something cognitively, where it's not just you're on a roller coaster and you're on for the ride, but you have control not over time, but over your spacing of activities within time. And so it is like, that's way beyond their years of understanding it, but that doesn't mean you can't implement it at a level.
It's the same sort of argument for the analog clock, because you can see the relationship of time as what's past and what's coming, right? You can see all of that visually. In terms of the other strategy too, I read this recently in some article about productivity, and they were referencing Seinfeld, and that his key to productivity was that he would take a goal and he would it was called Don't Break the Chain, and you just put an X if you do it every day, because you can't measure productivity sometimes in productivity, in the outcome, but you have to measure it in the process, and you have to find the pleasure in the process. And we want to increase the internal motivation for something, not I don't know why I do this, I just do it because I get this goal, or I get a grade, or I get, right? So the idea of not breaking the chain helps create that feedback loop where you get reinforcement, but it's about the process. So if you have a goal that you want to write every day, then did I write for 20 minutes? It doesn't matter if it was good, bad, or otherwise, but did you spend 20 minutes writing? Because if you do, it doesn't matter if you phone it in, eventually it will get better. Whether it's exercise, studying, did I do my 20 minutes of reading for this class? It doesn't matter if you got through all the material. It doesn't matter but building that habit. And so then you put up a thing like a calendar, and you put an X if you did it. Don't break the chain. And it's very satisfying to just see that, and that's a personal accomplishment. It's not I got a candy, or I got money, or I got a trip to the store. Like this, it's internalized, it's internal motivation. So that's another strategy that I think can be really helpful. When it comes to asking schools for help, I think that it's important. One of the things that I'm trying to advocate for myself as well as other parents is we are the co-teacher. If you're doing virtual school at home, you are the teacher's aide. You are the co-teacher. And I think that we need to feel comfortable to take on that, to ask for that role, to ask for things that assume that role, to say I might need the lesson in advance because I need to help prepare for this. I have questions about this. I want to talk to the teacher on a weekly basis so that I can check in and make sure that I'm supporting my student at home. Those are, if that's feasible for you, or you have someone coming into the home that's doing that for you, you're the you're the teacher's aide, you are the classroom assistant, like however you want to talk about it, like you are supporting their education and you are entitled to that information, and we shouldn't demand it, right? We want to be collaborative, but that's sort of an informal ask that I think that you can create space for, and you can approach schools and say, I really feel like a co-teacher here. I want to be prepared. I want to be engaged. I want to be able to support my student at home. And sort of work with them to create a collaborative and relationship. I think it's important that we ask for assessment. That is something that was missing in a lot of schools. At the end, they just kind of stopped testing and formalized assessment of any kind. And I think that it's important that as parents, we ask for that. What's the baseline assessment? Where's my student starting? And then how are we measuring progress? And how is that being measured? Not just did they show up to school, did they show up online, but what are we doing about assessment?
And I'll just throw in, maybe the teachers don't give it, but if they taught that class before, they have previous examinations for what they're teaching to.
Yeah.
You can answer that.
It shouldn't be a problem. It's also something that you can do at home. If you have a younger student, you're looking at reading, writing, or math skills. Readingrockets.org is a good resource for that, where you can look up fluency measures, and there's lots of information about what the expectations are for the right number of correct words you're supposed to read per minute, and it tells you kind of how to do it. They're called curriculum-based assessments, and you can do that at home. And you do it every 2 weeks. It's a 1-minute timed assessment to see if they're gaining in fluency. So those are things, if we can do it at home, they can certainly figure out how to do it at school, so that we're measuring progress to see how they're doing at school. When it comes to formal things that you can ask, if your child has an IEP, they have special education services, you can ask to have a meeting and have that updated so that the specially designed instruction, accommodations, and supports are appropriate for the setting. So if it's virtual or in person, that sort of thing, you can have it for both. When it's in person, these are the supports that they are entitled to. When it's at home, when it's virtual, these are the supports that are necessary, that need to be put into place. And coming up with a plan for that. If you are concerned, some things have happened, you suddenly have your kid at home and you're like, oh my gosh, they told me he was fine. I had no idea. This does not look fine to me. I didn't know that they were struggling this much. This doesn't look okay. You can still ask for an evaluation for special education. That is something that they still have to do. How the district does it will vary, whether they do it in person or virtually, and what sort of things they offer, but you are entitled to ask for that and to get services if they're found eligible. And it's an ever-changing situation, and it's very sort of difficult, and it depends on how the school district is handling it, but you can ask for it. They have 60 days to reply or to complete that evaluation, and you can request that for additional supports. If you think, you know what, they can't do this. They're not at grade level, they've fallen behind, and I think it's something more than just COVID, like the falling behind that everyone might do right now. I think it's more than that.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask for an evaluation, a formal evaluation, submit it.
And so on that, I've been really being mindful to be empathetic towards the end of these presentations. We're all professionals, and this is specifically to parents and then to professionals working with parents. We do this for a living, and it's almost second nature now. And so by us giving these strategies, we're not trying to make it sound easy. It is not easy. It's difficult. Nor can we say balancing a full-time job and doing this is easy. You might be, if you take this on as a burden, doing 80 hours a week of work, 40 for your job, or even 20 as a co-teacher. It takes time, and we've all started off with this focus of we didn't realize how much school provided, and it's helping us realize that. But the best thing I can say is being resilient through these periods of time. Knock on wood, hopefully this doesn't last forever, and we need to be resilient and push through these difficult times, leaning on different resources to help us through it. Just like we say to your kids, lower the expectations of the grades. This isn't ideal. You need to do the same for yourselves or for the parents you're working with. No, this isn't ideal. You didn't go to school to be a teacher, and now you're being a teacher. You didn't apply for this job to work from home, and now you need to do that and also be a babysitter. where it's tough, but just of being here or supporting and helping, you're trying, and that's the most important thing. That's what you can control. So I always just like to make sure, try one of these strategies, develop and show that attitude towards the kids you're either working with or your own kids of, I might not get it right, but I'm going to try. And that is the biggest lesson you can teach them through this, is that resilience and adversity through challenge. So on that note, thank you so much, Sarah. It's such a helpful lens. Thank you for sharing some of the personal experience as well. Sam, thank you for bearing with me, forcing you into that personal experience as well. I always torture you a little bit. And so I appreciate it, guys, and I hope you guys have a great one. We probably won't have our next one until after Labor Day, so I hope everyone has a great Labor Day weekend. Relax, take the day, be with family. We all need it, especially as we're going into an unknown. So thank you again, and I hope you guys all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Sarah. Bye, guys.
Thank you.